The prairie evening stretched wide, painted in amber and smoke, as the wind bent the tall grasses into whispers. Dust clung to the horizon, stirring shadows into shapes that made the road seem lonelier than it already was. Along this fading path walked Ahiana Whitefeather, 20 years old, the daughter of her tribe's proud chief, her moccasins brushing over earth that had known generations of footsteps. Her eyes, dark as storm clouds, carried a quiet restlessness, for though she was cherished by her people, she felt unseen in her own skin. The world around her hummed with life, yet she often felt like a song unsung. She carried this ache with every step that night, not knowing that the silence would soon be broken. From behind the rocks, rough laughter shattered the stillness. 3 men, their faces hardened by lawlessness, stepped into her path. Their boots crunched the gravel with deliberate menace, their voices carrying the bite of mockery. One reached for her wrist, his grip smelling of whiskey and sweat. Ahiana's breath caught in her throat, fear and fury fought inside her. She pulled back, but the dusk had closed in, and escape felt as distant as the stars. The men circled her like wolves, hungry not for food but for power. The prairie, so endless before, now felt like a cage. Then, from the far side of the road, a figure emerged, tall and shadowed against the setting sun. Cole Hartwell, 30 years old, a cowboy known only in passing whispers, rode his horse with a silence that unsettled even the boldest of men. He dismounted slowly, his boots pressing into the dirt with a rhythm heavy as thunder. He said nothing at first, just stood with a gaze that cut sharper than a blade. His silence unnerved the thugs, though one laughed nervously and spat into the dust. Cole's hand hovered near the revolver at his side, his movements measured, weary, like a man who had seen too much of the world's cruelty and grown tired of it, yet still unwilling to let it pass unchecked. The men lunged toward him, their bravado breaking against the stillness of his resolve. Steel flashed in the dim light, but Cole fought with restraint, swift, controlled, almost sorrowful. He knocked one down with the butt of his revolver, another with a fist that spoke of practiced survival, not glory. The third scrambled back, cursing, and fled into the brush. When silence returned, it was heavier than before, laden with the dust of struggle and the thrum of hearts still racing. Ahiana's breath was unsteady, her chest rising and falling as though she had been holding her soul hostage. She looked at him, really looked, and in the lines of his face she saw not only strength but a loneliness that mirrored her own. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Thank you." Cole met her gaze for only a moment before turning back to his horse, his silence louder than any words. With a small nod, he rode away, leaving behind the faint echo of hoofbeats. Yet in that space he left, Ahiana felt something bloom inside her chest, a seed of curiosity and longing that refused to be ignored. That night, by the firelight of her tribe's camp, the memory of him clung to her like smoke. Her people sang, the drums pulsed like heartbeats, but she was elsewhere, replaying the image of his weary eyes and the quiet way he had stood between her and danger. Tala Skybird, her childhood friend, teased her for her absent mind, yet Ahiana could not explain. She feared her feelings would sound foolish, for who falls in love with silence? Still, her thoughts turned over and over. Who was this cowboy who fought like a storm but spoke like a ghost? The tribe whispered too, though in sharper tones. Some warned that outsiders were trouble, that a cowboy's heart was never bound to one place. But Ahiana was not swayed. Curiosity tugged at her feet, leading her down the trails that wove near his cabin, a place said to be worn by loneliness. She left little offerings on the porch, wildflowers gathered at dawn, a feather from her headdress, a strip of woven cloth. She told herself it was gratitude, yet her heart betrayed her, beating harder each time she imagined him noticing. 4 days there was no sign. But one evening, as the horizon bruised purple and gold, she felt his gaze upon her. From the doorway of his cabin, Cole stood in shadow, watching. His face unreadable, his silence thick as dusk. When at last she gathered her courage, She walked to his door with trembling hands clutching a bouquet of meadow blossoms. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the hush of the evening. "I am not perfect," she said, "but I will give you love you never expected." For a moment, Cole's eyes softened, but then the shadow of old wounds drew the lines of his face tight again. He shook his head slightly, as if to ward off something he feared. Ashamed of his scars, his past, his unworthiness, he closed the door. Yet when she looked down, the flowers were gone from her hands. He had taken them inside. Days passed in a rhythm of gestures rather than words. She brought him food, setting it near his porch. In return, he repaired her horse's bridle when it frayed. They spoke only in fragments, yet every glance lingered longer, every silence grew richer with meaning. In the hush of twilight, they found themselves side by side at the riverbank, their reflections trembling together in the current. Her fingers brushed his as she handed him water, and though neither pulled away, neither dared to name the spark. Their connection was a quiet fire, fed not by declarations but by the weight of unspoken longing. Still, the tribe's whispers grew louder. Why would a princess risk her honor for an outsider? Why tether her heart to a man who carried shadows instead of promises? Then the morning broke with the roar of hooves. Jeb, Iron Fist, Callahan and his bandits stormed into the village, their laughter harsh as flames that devoured tents and turned the sky black with smoke. The children screamed, women scattered, men grabbed bows and rifles. The chaos swallowed everything, until Ahiana's cry split the din. Cole rode in from the ridge, drawn not by duty but by something far deeper. He fought with a fury that startled even himself. Each strike, each shot, was not the act of a mercenary but of a man unwilling to lose the fragile thread of belonging he had just begun to feel. He bled, staggered, yet rose again and again, shielding Ahiana with his body, pulling elders to safety, driving Callahan back with relentless force. Ahiana's heart clenched as she watched him fall to one knee, only to stand once more, fire in his eyes. Callahan raised his pistol toward Cole's back, and Ahiana screamed his name, the sound carrying raw terror across the battlefield. Running Bear, her father, witnessed it all. The courage, the sacrifice, the love written in every movement. In that moment the chief's doubts dissolved. When the bandits were finally broken, when smoke cleared and silence returned, Running Bear knelt beside the wounded cowboy. His voice was grave but warm, shaped by gratitude and the wisdom of years. "You have earned her hand, cowboy," he said softly, "and my people's respect." Cole's eyes closed, not in surrender, but in something gentler, acceptance. The nights that followed were filled with lantern light and music, the tribe's joy spilling like fire into the sky. Ahiana walked toward him beneath the stars, her steps slow but steady, her hands trembling with certainty. Their vows were not words but the way their eyes held one another, the tears that glistened unashamed, the kiss that sealed their promise. Around them, laughter and drums swirled, the joining of two worlds celebrated as though the earth itself rejoiced. And in the quiet that followed the dancing, Cole leaned close and whispered, "You saved me more than I saved you." His voice carried no shame, only truth, a truth she felt deep in her bones. She pressed her forehead to his, and in that moment the world was no longer divided between tribe and cowboy, loneliness and belonging. It was simply theirs. Years later, when the prairie wind bends the grass into whispers, the old ones tell the story as though it were a memory their own hearts had lived. They say love is never about perfection, it is about presence, about standing when all else falls, about leaving flowers at a door even when you fear it will close. And so, if ever you feel unworthy of love, remember the cowboy and the princess who found eternity in gestures, in silences, in the wild beating of their imperfect hearts.